Well, hello everyone. Welcome to another edition of One Plus One, your place for inconvenient truth telling and myth busting. And it's another one of our All Things Africa edition, our journey across the continent, looking at the history and current affairs of each country and their respective regions. This episode, we look at the history and current affairs of Mauritius, one of the six island nations in our final chapter of this series, and who bear to teach us about this African country or any African country than Abayomi Azikie of Pan-African Newswire, frequent contributor to Black Agenda Reports. Abayomi is a lifelong independent journalist and historian, anti-imperialist, pan-Africanist leftist, who does a lot of solidarity work and political education on Africa and others targeted by Western imperialism, as well as a racial and social justice warrior. He's our historical and tour guide here, and as always, don't forget, folks, to donate generously to One Plus One at our PayPal. If you want to donate another way, or you have suggestions and other forms of donation, then get in touch at yurismilder at Gmail. Don't forget to share us widely on Facebook, because sometimes Facebook blocks me from sharing, and your sharing is the only way of growing an audience and overcoming corporates and Western state media and far-right media's monopoly. So please do share. Don't forget, and also don't forget to help out my colleague, Chris Richards, the Eclectic Radical. Join him on Patreon, his Substack, check him out, and share his content on YouTube widely, because he's facing unemployment, his situation's getting more dire, so he really needs our help. And also, often don't do other pluggings, but I also do want to encourage folks, especially our Canadian audience, to become a monthly sustainer to the new left-wing organization, Capitalism Can't Be Fixed. Good friend of the show, frequent returning champion, and one of my favorite people, Jasmine Peardon. She does a lot of work, a lot of heavy lifting for Capitalism Can't Be Fixed, and if we all become monthly sustainers, she can get paid for all of the work that she does there. Capitalism Can't Be Fixed wants to give her, wants to pay her wage of $1,000 a month, but that can only happen if more of us become monthly sustainers. So I encourage people to please do that. It's money well spent, and it's our only way of also advancing true socialist, social justice movements. And now,
Now, is that organization, let me
yes.
just ask, is that organization, was it part of the NDP at some point or what?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, it was basically, yeah, well, yeah. To answer your question, yes, it was part of the Eve for NDP leadership campaign, as well as the Bianca Mugeni for NDP leadership campaign. And when both of them were barred from entering the leadership race, the 45 folks who were part of both Eve and Bianca's campaign, including Eve and Bianca herself, decided to not take all of this lying down. Let's start an organization that advances a socialist, anti-capitalist ideology and so forth. So the title "Capitalism Can't Be Fixed: Onwards to a Socialist Future," that was the policy manifesto that Eve and his team of 45 ladies and gentlemen and non-binary all drafted together in the event that he would hopefully enter the race, and that would be his policy proposal. And that is still on the books, although they're in the midst of updating it more often. And yes, and it's a great organization. Jasmine does every Wednesday. She does a lot of Wednesday political education events. Eve has done many events for them. Tamara Lorenz, Owen Schock, often to talk about NATO, imperialism, and so forth. They even had a Canadian medic who was part of the medic response team to the ongoing genocide in Gaza. So she was an eyewitness to that, and gave us a very disturbing breakdown and very disturbing journey into what she experienced and what she was an eyewitness to. Uh, that was very shocking, and they recently also had two Cuba solidarity activists to talk about the embargo, Trump's latest embargo, how the Cuban people are faring, the incredible resilience. But they stress to us that that the resilience of the Cuban Revolution can only go so far. So folks do need to mobilize and mobilize like hell to stop this monstrous economic terrorism, sanctions of mass destruction, whatever one wants to call it. And then they also recently had folks to educate people about the AI data centers, why folks should be mobilizing against the AI data centers, why there should be a moratorium. And even if you do agree with opening an AI data center, there should be critical debates and critical information that should be part of local governments and bigger federal governments when it comes to something like this. And so it's a brilliant organization. Jasmine really does incredible work, and I would really like that she gets compensated for the work she does. So I do think
Great.
so folks, become a monthly become a monthly sustainer. You can cut back on the Spotify. All the free music is on YouTube anyways. You can cut down on one or two of the streaming services. If you have HBO Max, do cut down on HBO Max. If you have Amazon Prime, trust me, you don't need Amazon Prime if you already do your shopping on Amazon, and you can cut down on HBO Max and drop that, because why would we want to give our money to a douchebag Zionist like Bill Maher? So that's my pitch.
Okay. Great.
And here we are, episode 401. Let's get started with
Yes.
with Mauritius. So, Abayomi, as always, tell us, what was Mauritius like before it became a British colony, and then how did it become a British colony, and then what were the conditions of the people like under the evil British Empire?
Yes. Well, this is a very, very interesting country. It's composed of a series of islands in what is known as the Indian Ocean. The
Mm-hmm.
area is east of Madagascar, which we'll talk about in future programs.
Yeah, two
But
episodes from now. Yeah.
according to the European historians, Madagascar was, quote, uninhabited, unquote, which I have a problem with. There are several areas around Africa, even inside the continent, which Europeans say were uninhabited prior to their intervention. And that's a very, very difficult issue to deal with. But in terms of European influence, in 1502, the area was identified by the Portuguese in the world map that they had put together prior to that time period. Now, it is said that the Portuguese arrived there. They didn't see anybody there on the islands. Nonetheless, prior to that, it is said that possibly some Arab sailors, travelers, or explorers had been there centuries before. Nonetheless, the Portuguese attempted to set it up as an outpost of their growing empire. They were one of the first European countries, next to the Kingdom of Castiles, which is part of Spain. Beginning in the 15th century, they sent out ships to circumnavigate Africa and other parts of Asia, all the way over to South America.
Mm-hmm.
And they attempted to establish a fort or settlement in one of the Mauritius Islands. There's several of them. The largest and most densely populated is called Mauritius, but there are others as well that are part of today's Republic of Mauritius. And it's interesting, with all this territory, the population there is an estimated 1.2 million for
Wow.
the entire Republic of Mauritius. So after the Portuguese, there was the intervention of the Dutch, which also attempted to set it up as a colony through the Dutch East India Company. That went on for several decades, but it was not able to be consolidated. After the Dutch intervention, there was the intervention of France. And of course, during that time period, France and Britain were competing with each other for the control of the world, not only Europe, but also other parts, other geopolitical regions in Africa, as well as in Asia. And later, beginning in the 19th century, around 1810, the British declared themselves as being in control of Mauritius. So it went under successive European interventions, and eventually the British established it. It was a prosperous colony for the British, yet they set up a very, very crude and highly exploitative system of extraction of labor as well as natural resources. Sugar production became very important, as well as other agricultural products. Now, this went on all during the 19th century into the 20th century. And what happened was that after World War I, there was greater agitation on the part of the people of Mauritius for better conditions, whether it was better salaries, improved working conditions, and also the end of economic exploitation. So in 1936, there was the formation of the Labor Party, which was the oldest, which is still a major player in Mauritian politics, but they were considered the first political party to be established in Mauritius, and this was under British colonialism.
And when the country got its independence, was it one of violent struggle or was it one of peaceful transfer of power?
It was a combination of both. There were rebellions that took place. We know in the 20th century, there was a series of rebellions and unrest inside the country. Uh, Mauritius is a very interesting country. You had the importation of people from South Asia, mainly Indians, many of whom were Hindus, but also many of whom were Muslims. Now, even today, they constitute the largest ethnic group in Mauritius. There's also what
Interesting.
is called the so called Creole population, which is defined as those people who were brought from the African continent. And then, of course, you have some French and some British inhabitants as well. But the Indo-Mauritius population is the largest bloc, largest ethnic group in Mauritius, and they played a very important role and still do in the politics of the country. But in 1936, the Labor Party was formed, and with that, there was strikes and eventual rebellions that occurred between 1936 all the way up to 1968. We're talking about a period of 3 decades of labor organizing, political organizing, rebellions, and other efforts to gain independence and freedom from the British. However, there were other forces in Mauritius who were against independence, who were concerned for various reasons, whether or not the country would be dominated by the Indian population. And that, of course, fueled unrest as well. And there were others who wanted to remain within the British sphere of influence, who didn't want independence, and they felt they would be better served under the British monarchy. And even after independence, the country was still under the Queen of England as the principal head of state in Mauritius. Now, that has changed somewhat over the post-independence period, but nonetheless, all these different political ideas were clashing in Mauritius, particularly during the 20th century. The Labor Party, of course, was very dominant beginning in 1936, but there are other parties which have surfaced since the 1930s, and many of these parties have either merged with the Labor Party or set up temporary coalitions with the Labor Party, as well as other organizations.
Fascinating, and I believe we'll even talk a bit more about how unfortunately there is a lot of deep-seated racial divisions, which unfortunately divides the vast working class, while the big plantation owners, largely of both British and French colonial descent, are still are still riding the gravy train, as we say. So
Yes.
So that's a perfect segue into this question. So what was the socio-economic legacy of Mauritius's first prime minister, Sir C. Wagasaru Ramgoolam, who ruled the country from March the 12th, 1964 to June 15th, 1982. His political party, is the Labour Party, which on paper, Wikipedia says they are supposed to be a social democratic party, center-left. They are members of Socialist International, which is where the global center left, leftists, and sometimes strongly more left leaning parties meet to see how they can advance a global left agenda or help one another out when it comes to winning elections. However, the organization has been dominated by Western Europe and Nordic social democratic parties who have been guilty of supporting Western imperialism, social imperialism. And since the late 70s and early 80s, many of these parties have pivoted hard to the right, especially on domestic issues and against their own working class base. The same is true of its sister organization, Progressive Alliance. And many of the global south and some of those non-European, non-North American left parties often can be way too much influenced by this power dynamics in the playbook of Western, Euro, Nordic, social democratic left. And currently, they are part of an alliance of. In Mauritius, the Labour Party currently is part of an alliance of left-leaning parties in Mauritius. So again, sorry for that detour, but what is the socioeconomic legacy of the first Labour Prime Minister of Mauritius?
Yes, well, it's quite interesting because leading up to the independence of Mauritius, which took place in 1968, there was a reconfiguration of British colonialism and imperialism in the Indian Ocean region. In 1965, which is interesting because this represented the large buildup and the deployment of hundreds of thousands of US troops into South Vietnam.
Yeah.
In 1965, they set up what was known as the British Indian Ocean Territories. This was in 1965. And in doing that, they were attempting to hijack the independence process in Mauritius, as well as other countries in the region. And in doing that, they broke off certain islands. For example, the Chagos Islands, which Diego Garcia is a part of. They were broken off from Mauritius control, which it had been under British colonialism. And Diego Garcia was leased to the United States under President Lyndon Johnson, and it serves even today as a major U.S. military outpost for their imperialist intrigue. It was utilized during the Vietnam War for refueling and other issues when they were heavily bombing South Vietnam as well as North Vietnam during the late 1960s and all the way up to 1973. And the Chagos Islands, of course, the largest one, Diego Garcia, was turned into a huge U.S. military base. And even today, that issue is still not resolved. But we'll talk about later the International Court of Justice ruling from last year, which returned ostensibly Diego Garcia to Mauritius, the Republic of Mauritius control.
Yeah.
So we have to take that into consideration. So even during the period of early independence, the country was crippled in terms of not being able to exercise sovereignty among other islands, which had been under the British colonial system. So in 1959, the British, of course, began to talk about, quote, winds of change, unquote, meaning that they realized they would not be able to hold on to their colonies in the classical sense, that they had to unleash the independence movements, which had already been demanding sovereignty from the colonial authorities. So when this happened, of course, there was a whole independence process which took place. There was a Lancaster conferences in relationship to Mauritius that were held during the period of the late 1950s through the early and mid 1960s. And during this process, the whole process of elections, negotiations, and the post-independence process was agreed upon between the British as well as the political parties that had been set up in Mauritius. So the Labour Party turned out to be the most dominant party in that particular regard, but there were other parties that surfaced as well. And the Labour Party was founded by a guy who was known as Maurice Cure, and he was a very, very important figure in the early independence movement, in the labor movement as well. But these are very, very important issues to understand, because even before the country was independent, they already had been hampered in terms of actual sovereignty and control over all of those territories. And we saw, of course, with the situation in Diego Garcia over the last 60 years, has still not been settled. And even with the British agreeing to ostensibly turn over sovereignty of the Diego Garcia to Mauritius, there are people who lived in Diego Garcia, or they call themselves the Chagosians,
Yeah.
many of whom were not satisfied with the ICJ's ruling and are still demanding complete sovereignty and independence and the right of return of the Chagosian island former inhabitants and their descendants to that territory in the Indian Ocean. Now, from what I've seen, most of the people who are Chagosians are of African descent.
Yeah.
Now, a lot of those people were brought there as slaves, and they were removed forcibly from Diego Garcia, many of whom were taken to Britain, where they still live, and they're still campaigning there for independence of the Chagos Islands. And they were the ones who spearheaded the legal challenges against the British government over the character of their state, and also demanding complete sovereignty from not only Britain, but also from Mauritius. So these are some of the dynamics that were involved in the whole independence process.
But what's the socioeconomic legacy of the first prime minister of the Labour Party, Sir C. Wasagar Ram Ghulam?
Well, they wanted equal rights for working people. They wanted full democracy for the people. They were, on paper at least, they said they were opposed to capitalist exploitation of the workers, which was intense under British imperialism. And today, even, the country has one of the highest economic performance rates within the African continent. They are part of the African Union, and they are, of course, considered one of the most well-off territories and countries on the African continent. It's a small population. On some of the islands, it's decentralized populations, and the role of tourism, as well as agricultural production and light industrial production, has benefited a lot of the people inside the country.
Interesting. So he inherits that. He more or less tries to pursue some policies. I guess well, from the research I've done, it's safe to say that his legacy is a bit of a mixed bag. So that's a perfect segue into this question, which is that from June 15, 1982 to December 22nd, 1995, the country was then governed by Sir Anirudh Jagannath of the MSM. This is quite interesting because the MSN is a militant socialist movement, which again on Wikipedia they claimed to be a social democratic alternative to the Labour Party. So what's his legacy, Sir? Sir Anurad Jagannath of the MSM?
Pretty much the same. The Labour Party, although it was dominant, they did form alliances with other political parties and interests, and they became the Independence Party, leading up to the period of national independence. And they were, of course, in alliance with other parties, including the Independent Forward Bloc, the IFB, that was founded by Sekodua Basu Ndoyal, That was formed in 1958. Also, there's the Muslim Action Committee, and also that was founded by Sir Abdul Razak Muhammad. Now, what's interesting about this is that even though the Indian population there constitutes the majority, they have been divided over the question of religion between the Hindus and the Muslims. And despite the fact that they have similar national backgrounds, there's extreme mistrust between Hindus and Muslims that have played itself out, even on the in India itself, in South Asia.
Yeah.
And we can see today with the government of Modi has been ruthless in its handling of the aspirations of the Muslim population in India. Some people go as far as to say that Modi is a fascist. And the Muslims have suffered persecution under his political party there. So you had these interests that were split. Like I said, even among the Indian population itself, there were divisions between the Hindus and the Muslims. And of course, there were rebellions, 1937, another one in 1943, 1965, 1967, as well as 1968, leading up to the independence of the country, because there were fears over, which nationality or ethnic group would be dominant in the post-independence period. The Creoles, who are really the Africans there, were concerned about not having enough political power in the post-independence period. Then, of course, the divisions between the Hindus and the Muslims among the Indian community. Then you had the British and people who were allied with the British, who in actuality, some of them were opposed to national independence. They wanted to remain almost exclusively under British domination.
Yeah.
That did not happen. But as I mentioned earlier, the British monarchy remained as the head of state there up until 1992. We're talking about 34 years ago when they became a republic. So these are some of the issues that have surfaced during that particular time period. But a lot of the divisions that exist in the Republic of Mauritius have a lot to do with the various sectors of the population. There are ideological differences. I mean, there was a militant movements that developed, the socialist militant movements that developed over the course of the last 60 plus years. And we can talk about that in detail even later.
And after the MSM governed, the country was then led by Naveen Ramgoolam, again of the PT Labour Party, from December the 27th, 1995 to September 16th, 2000. What is his legacy? And then Sir Anurag Jagannath is elected again from September the 16th, 2000 to September 30th, 2003. What was his socioeconomic legacy then?
Largely the same. The country has a small population. It is rooted heavily in agricultural production, and they have introduced tourism to a large degree in recent decades. So a lot of the activity, the economic policies are directed externally in terms of the export of agricultural products, as well as making the country more conducive to tourism. And that is how they make their money. And that is how the country has become one of the most prosperous on the African continent, interestingly enough.
Yes, and then the country was then governed by Paul Berenger and the party, the MMM, the Mauritian Militant Movement, which is again also supposed to be on paper a social democratic party, democratic socialist, and a socially liberal and tolerant party. They are members of the sister organization to the SA Socialist Alliance, which is a progressive alliance. Uh,
Yes.
he ruled September the 30th, 2003 to July the 5th, 2005. Again, what is his legacy? And then, interestingly enough, the nation then found itself governed again by Naveen Ramgoolam and the Labour Party from July the 5th, 2000 to December the 13th, December 2014. What's also his socio-economic legacy?
Yeah, I think he was of French origin. And, so it shows that they still have people there who are of French descent. Some immigrated there, others were left over from the French dominance there during the 18th and early 19th centuries. But yes, most of them, although on paper, as you said, have declared themselves as social democrats, uh, their policy is largely centered towards exports as well as the proliferation of tourism as a generator of foreign exchange. And it appears to have worked for at least the political parties that are there and their adherents. But of course, uh, we have to talk to people who live there to actually see, what is the actual conditions that people live under in this current period of globalization.
Exactly. And and yeah, and like many island nations, when you get the postcards, when you get the advertisements, and I'm sure even if you and I we were to visit and go to the best five-star hotels that they have to
Yes.
offer, or hostels that they have to offer, doesn't change the fact that there's also quite a lot of poverty there and huge gaps between the rich and the poor. And I think that's a great segue to this, which is the country. After these leaders, after multiple leaders get reelected, the country was then governed once more by Sir Anurad Jagannath, 13th of December 2014 to 23rd of January 2017 with the MSM, and then the same party governed, was then led by Praveen Jagannath from late January 2017 to November the 12th, 2024. What are both of their socioeconomic legacies?
Pretty much the same. They have not uh, created a lot of controversy. There has been controversy, but there has not been any breakdown in regard to civil society. Never been a civil war per se. And since the period leading up to independence and during the independence movement, they had rebellions, as I mentioned, from the 1930s all the way up to the 1960s. But it has been a relatively stable and somewhat peaceful state since the resolution of various issues during the early phase of the independence movement, where there was factionalism, there were splits within the Labor Party and the Independence Party, and realignments within various political parties as well. So you'll have a situation where one political party is formed and they form alliances with other political parties, which erupt and break up, and then they realign themselves with other political parties. So for example, the Alliance for Change,
Yeah.
which ostensibly is in charge now, is really uh, largely headed by the Labour Party of Naveen Ramgoolam, who is also head of the Labour Party as well as the Alliance for Change.
It's interesting.
Yeah.
Since November the 12th, 2024, Mauritius has been governed by Naveen Raghulam, as you mentioned, and the PC Labour Party again. How do you assess his governance so far, and how are the mass working class and even desolate poor faring under his leadership? And with that in mind, do talk more about the racial tensions that do exist between those of the South Asian community, the Indian community, uh, and also those of Creole backgrounds, those of Diego Garcia, who are I don't know if internal colony is the right term for it, but they do live they live mostly in urban slums. A lot of them don't even have jobs, in the agricultural department or even whatever low income job that comes with working at a supermarket, working at restaurants, working as butlers, working in the hotel world. So talk more about that and the racial divisions that exist, which hampers working class unity that is much needed, especially when it comes to holding whomever is in power to account. Because while Mauritius on paper is one of the more peaceful countries, does have a good booming tourism industry, there's a dark side to any of that, not least that a lot of the plantation and so forth is concentrated in a very small elite people of British and French descent whose forefathers were the colonial administrators of Mauritius.
Mhm. Well, yes, the so-called Creole population, which is largely the indigenous Africans, many of whom were brought from other territories in the region and enslaved under the British colonial system, many of them do want to return to their home in Diego Garcia and what they describe as the Chagos Islands.
Yeah,
So they have been preoccupied with that for decades, since the late 1960s. And some from Diego Garcia was taken to Mauritius, others were taken to the UK, where many of them still reside today. So all of this still has to be resolved within the national context. Now, the International Court of Justice ruling said that the Chagos Island had to be returned to Mauritius. Some people think that's a good thing. Other Chagosians see that as being wholly inadequate
yeah,
and still want to fight for genuine independence and sovereignty over Diego Garcia and the other Chagos Islands. But the United States does not want to give up that territory. And even under Mauritius control, they are opposed to it. I've heard Trump make those comments, for example, in relationship to the previous British Prime Minister, Sir Keir Starmer,
yeah.
saying he would agree with Keir Starmer's acceptance of the ICJ ruling of 2025. So we'll have to see what happens, but I don't see the British, at least at this point. Maybe if the Reform UK takes over the British government and has the keys to 10 Downing Street, perhaps they will say something. But I don't see the British military being in a position right now to re-exert any type of control, even indirectly, over Mauritius or Diego Garcia. The biggest threat, in my opinion, would be the United States, since they already have a military base there, and they could very easily prevent any repatriation of the indigenous population back to the Chagos Islands. But yes, it's a horrendous situation that was developed there. I mean, people were living there for decades, and all of a sudden, these U.S. planes show up, British planes show up, and people are just picked up, told you have to leave here ASAP, and then taken to Mauritius or to the United Kingdom. So I think that issue still has to be resolved, and I think it will be resolved largely due to the efforts of the Chagosians themselves, but also the internal politics inside of the UK, which is very, very unstable at this point.
Yeah, we're going to be talking about that next week, and it's interesting that you mentioned reform because, interestingly enough, Nigel Farage of
Yeah.
Nigel Farage of the Reform Party. I don't agree with him on most things, but interestingly enough, he has spoken up for the people of the Chagos Islands. Although he still more or less wants Diego Garcia to be under British rule, and just is absolutely adamant that that the Chagos Islands should not be given to Mauritius because it is a British overseas territory. But I don't know how conversations between him and Donald Trump are going to go when the U.S. says no, no, no. Well, it belongs to us. You guys gave it to
Right.
us, so that's going to be
Yeah.
quite interesting. Don't
Yeah,
know
but how
who
can it belong to them?
don't know who the art of the deal is going to come out winning here. Is it going to be Nigel Farage's wheeling deal, or wheeling dealing, or is it going to be Donald Trump's art of the constree? So
Well, it's interesting you mentioned the term art of the deal, which was his book, you know, which is pretty absurd. I mean, considering all his failed business ventures and his failed tenures as president, two consecutive terms. But yeah, how can they claim Diego Garcia is theirs when in fact it's so far away from the United States in the so-called Indian Ocean, and it's just a military base for U.S. imperialism to exert its control and attempted control over other geopolitical regions, particularly in Africa as well as Asia. So it's an absurd notion, but these notions are still out there. I mean, the fact that the British still have overseas territories, the French
yeah,
still have departments, as well. So it's a very, very bad situation for the people there. Even what we talked about last week, the Union of Comoros, the fact that you still have Mayate, which is still considered a French department, and there's been rebellions there in recent years, and they've prevented the Union of Comoros from exercising sovereignty over the islands of Mayate. So it's a very, very horrendous, but it's an ongoing situation. The United States claims sovereignty over various areas of the world as well, claiming that it belongs to them. Places like Guam, Puerto Rico.
America
And
Samoa.
yes,
It's so scandalous that Britain not only has the Malvinas, which should rightly belong to Argentina, but they also have a part of Spain. Gibraltar, and then they have a
yeah,
part of Northern Ireland. I mean, they have a part of
mhm,
Ireland, Northern Ireland, and then so and then
yes.
yeah. So
And
it's quite outrageous.
Greenland, the question of Greenland as well, which Trump raised again last year. They're supposed to be under the control, and they are under the control of the kingdom of, there, the
Denmark, yeah,
kingdom of
yeah,
Norway. Yeah.
absolutely, yeah,
And Trump
absolutely
says it should
outrageous.
belong to the United States. They need it for security purposes. Yes, but the indigenous people in Greenland are not even considered in any discussion over the future of Greenland. Yes, so it's an ongoing problem, and oppressed peoples and socialist-oriented organizations and parties have to take up these questions because they're very much uh, a part, of the political situation now, and it will be in the future. You cannot claim control and sovereignty over other people's lands far away from where these metropolises or capitals exist, metropoles exist. So it's an ongoing struggle, and it will be an ongoing struggle.
And let's also not forget Free West Papua. A perfect
Yes,
segue.
as well.
Perfect segue to this question. So, during the Cold War, was Mauritius aligned with the USSR, the Eastern European Communist Bloc, Cuba, Vietnam, and China, or more forcibly aligned with the Western Imperial Bloc of Britain, the US, France, West Germany, Canada, Australia, New Zealand? Or was it non aligned but leaned more towards the Western Imperial orbit? Very curious response.
Yeah, I would say the latter, non-aligned, but at the same time being dependent to a large degree on exports of the agricultural products and also of the tourism, a lot of which comes from the Western imperialist countries. So I would say they were non-aligned, but at the same time leaning more towards the West, but with political parties that claim to be social democrats.
Mm-hmm. And was Mauritius and what is Mauritius's relations with BRICS? Does it have special relations with certain members, or?
I'm not. I don't think they are because with the small population there, I'm sure they're interested in participating in the Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa plus summit. But I don't know if they'd be in a position at this stage to join BRICS. But the Southern African Development Community, which they are part of, the Southern African Regional Organization, has a good relationship with BRICS because the Republic of South Africa is a full member of BRICS. So they do send delegations to the BRICS summits as observers. But in terms of them integrating their economy into BRICS, I don't think that would be possible, at least in the near future.
And what is Mauritius's stance on AFRICOM and the recent anti-French Spring happening in Western Africa, like Burkina Faso?
Yeah, I'm not sure exactly what their position is in regard to the anti-French rebellion that has been taking place over the last perhaps 6 years in Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger, as well as other states. But I'm sure they're sympathetic to it because under neocolonialism, particularly the neocolonialism as exercised by France and the United States and Britain, would not be beneficial to the economic growth of any country in Africa. But some of these states have gone back and forth. For example, Chad, I read earlier this week, Chad in Africa, Central West Africa region, would be open again to French military cooperation, which is unfortunate.
Yeah.
But although they were saying last year and year before last, they wanted the French troops to withdraw from Chad. Now it seems as if they're having second thoughts about that. Even countries like Senegal, for example, which are in the same region as the Alliance of Sahel states, it was thought that when the current president, Faye, came to power, that in 2024, that he would move in the direction of the AES, and that has not happened. He visited France, and some of the political parties that have been enacted in Senegal has caused a split within the ruling party. So it appears as if the president is going to break off and form his own party, whereas his former comrade, Sanko, will remain in the Pan-African Patriots movement. So we'll have to see what develops.
That's very unfortunate to hear.
Yeah.
And final question then is this: now Mauritius, according to Wikipedia, the following: the island's government is closely modeled on the Westminster parliamentary system, with Mauritius highly ranked for economic and political freedom. The Economic Democracy Index ranks Mauritius as the only country in Africa with full democracy, while the Dem democracy indices classified it as an electoral democracy. Mauritius ranks 73rd, very high in the Human Development Index, and the World
Right.
Bank classifies it as a high income economy. It is amongst the most competitive and most developed economies in Africa. The country does have a welfare state. The government provides free universal health care, free education up through the tertiary level, and free public transportation for students, senior citizens, and disabled people. Mauritius is consistently ranked as the most peaceful country in Africa, but given all of that, there is still, I believe, poverty. Slums, even, that many people from Diego Garcia have been living in since Britain decided to depopulate that island for a massive American base that stores nuclear facilities and more, which Abayomi has already talked with us many times already on the program. Now, given all that, if there is still widespread poverty or even modest poverty, despite whatever mistakes or broken promises that past left-leaning governments have failed to advance and implement, is the answer to the island's plight more socialism, Pan-Africanist leftism, and the same agenda continent-wide to address the plight of the struggling working class and destitute poor. Very curious.
Most definitely. And that is, of course, a rhetorical question. Because, yes, as Pan Africanists, as socialists, definitely that is the solution. Now, the Mauritian Labour Party, to a large degree, was patterned on the British Labour Party of the early and mid 20th century.
Oh, what a shame!
So that's why when you mention the Westminster style democratic dispensation is to a large degree accurate, particularly during the 20th century. And when you say it's considered one of the most democratic, that is largely because of the various political parties that are allowed to operate freely inside the country, and also the shifting alliances among the political parties. So there's not been an effort to form a one-party state or to outlaw political parties, at least during the post-independence period. Of course, there was repression during the colonial period under Britain, but at the same time, after that, particularly after 1959, 1960, the so-called, quote, winds of change, unquote, period, there was an encouragement of the formation of political parties. But these parties, the ones that were favored, were operating within the sphere of Western capitalism or social democracy. Now, you mentioned the concept of a welfare state. That's very interesting as well, because after World War II, Britain moved into a welfare state economy, and the United States did as well. After the Great Depression, which began in 1929, we know in the 1930s, even prior to the British so-called social welfare state of the post-World War II period, instituted welfare, the Social Security Act of 1935, and other reforms, unemployment insurance, for example, food stamps, to a limited degree and to a greater degree during the 1960s, particularly under John F. Kennedy and later Lyndon Johnson.
There are also limitations
Yes,
to all of that. But in terms of social mobility and social advancement, much better than what existed before that, in which Britain was still very much a Victorian. A Victorian style of plutocracy where the working class had no rights. In America, it was still very much a Gilded Age and the wreckages of the 1920s and the Great Depression and so forth.
of course. And those programs were instituted largely at the aegis of the left. The Communist Party in the United States at that time pushed forward these programs, anti-foreclosure regulations, anti-eviction committees, which made sure people weren't thrown out on the streets. The programs such as the Civilian Conservation Corps, the CCC, which were job creation programs, but they were created for the benefit of people in the urban areas as well as rural areas. Then, of course, the Social Security Act of 1935, 91 years ago, has been essential because in the past, when people got old, if they didn't have money, if they didn't own land, they would have to be exclusively dependent upon their children or charitable organizations just to survive. So these programs were created to prevent people from starving to death and to make sure they were housed between the 1930s up until the 1970s, when you start having different programs, particularly in the late 1970s, of financial what do they call it? Financial liberalization, allowing the corporations more freedom, moving away from antitrust laws. And that even started under the Democrat Jimmy Carter in 1978.
Yeah.
And it also continued under subsequent Democratic administrations, for example, Bill Clinton during the 1990s, where he said he wanted to, quote, eliminate welfare as we know it and put 100,000 new cops on the street. This was part of his campaign in 1992, even though he has been promoted as America's, quote, first Black president unquote. Which is
Yes,
absurd.
and even the MTV president, even though he, in
Yeah,
his, even though in his State of the Union address, the year of big government is over.
yeah. And the building of public housing, which started during the 1930s, during the Depression, so people would not be on the street. But what people overlook often in the whole social welfare process, or the social welfare state, is the rise of the Soviet Union and the World Socialist Movement, which posed a challenge to world capitalism. And that's why, in many cases, these states were, were able to liberalize their economies and their societies. For example, the 1954 Supreme Court decision on school desegregation. That, of course, had a lot to do with the fact that you had the Soviet Union, which was growing in economic strength and in political influence, the Chinese Revolution of 1949, the Korean Revolution of 1945, and the formation of the Democratic People's Republic of Korea in 1948, the independence movements that swept Africa as well as Asia, the independence of India in 1947, and of course the eventual Bandung movement and the non-aligned movement between 1955 and 1961. So all of these international developments, whether it's the anti-colonial movement, the seizure of power by socialist and communist parties in Europe, and even in Cuba in 1959, had a lot to do with shaping domestic as well as U.S. foreign policy, because they saw themselves as being in competition with the socialist camp. So they had to liberalize from that standpoint. But today, they have a different view. For example, the Republicans and even the Democrats inside the United States are still largely neoliberal in their political and economic orientation. So you don't hear hardly anything about creating more benefits, social benefits, in terms of food, housing, education. In fact, we see the reverse taking place. Like in the States, people are swamped with student loan debt. And even under Biden, there was an attempt to forgive student loan debt to huge segments of the student population or former student population. But then there was a lawsuit, and the Supreme Court said, no, you really can't do that. There's something unfair about relieving people of student loan debt in comparison to those who did pay off their student loans. It's absurd. So it's like the inconsistency of capitalist logic. On the one hand, they said, well, people should pay off their debts, but if the debt is strangling people who are trying to start their lives, the fact that they can't buy homes, a lot of them cannot pay off the loans because they don't make enough money in the employment that they have, and somehow this is favoring those people over those who did have the money to pay off their student loans. So it's an illogical system. And people like Donald Trump and the MAGA movement are opposed to all of that. They do not want forgiven student loans. They do not want government subsidies for housing, for food. In fact, they've cut eligibility for the SNAP benefits, the Supplemental Nutritional Agricultural Program, and the WIC program, which is Women, Infant, and Children. Now, these programs are set up to prevent starvation and to support nutrition among working class people and those who are highly impoverished, but they're opposed to it. And you can see the impact of it on the streets in a leading capitalist state in the world. People are still living in the streets in major cities throughout the United States. Visit Los Angeles, for example, downtown Los Angeles, and you see people living in the streets. Even in other areas outside the urban municipalities in California, people have set up camps, homeless camps in wooded areas. Similar situation in San Francisco in the Bay Area, in Seattle in the Pacific Northwest, places like Philadelphia, for example, an advanced city, the first capital of the United States of America. Homelessness is a serious problem. And even here in Detroit, we can see it rising. More and more people sleeping on the streets, even on Woodward Avenue, which is the main thoroughfare in the city of Detroit. I can see people sleeping on the streets, and then perhaps a few days or a few weeks later, they disappear. So apparently, they're picking these people up, forcing them into homeless shelters because it looks very bad when at public transportation depots and stops, people are sitting there all day and all night, sleeping there during the day and during the evening with no food, and even the food distribution is not good. A lot of people still are hungry here in the United States. You have various agencies that distribute food, but that was under threat late last year because of the government shutdown. And as a result of the government shutdown, they were not handing out SNAP benefits. They were not being loaded on these EBT cards where people could go to a supermarket or even a convenience store to buy food and drinks.
Yeah.
Uh, they did resolve that to a certain degree, but at the same time, um, uh, it's not at the same level. Even Medicaid, which is a healthcare program for low income people, eligibility for those programs have been slashed by the MAGA Republicans who are running the White House, the House of Representatives, as well as the Senate. So we see this in England. There's a whole debate over welfare right now in the UK. The Conservative Party is saying that the government is spending too much money on welfare. And but what do you want people to do? You want it to be like the United States, where people are sleeping on the streets? They
There's
don't have health care.
right now, Liz Truss, the failed British Tory Prime
Tory
Minister,
Prime Minister, yeah,
who loves to travel to the United States and wear her "Make America Great Again" hats. She likes to wear a version of that that says "Make Britain Great Again." She's been organizing the British CPAC conferences across the UK, where the far right get together to influence the already ruling center right to far right parties. And I believe she's even flirting with the idea of joining the Reform Party, because many ex Tories, some of the most
right.
ghastly far right neo Keynesian Tories, are now joining the Reform Party of Nigel Farage
Yes,
and
Suella
Richard Tice.
Braverman is one who's
Cruella
of Indian
Braverman,
descent,
yeah, who
and she was Home Secretary under Rishi Sunak,
yeah,
and who's also of Indian descent. So they got them. They had the Conservative Party when it was in its deepest crisis. They bring in people of color like they did with Barack Obama in 2008 during the so-called Great Recession.
and they
They'd have him take over.
and of course, they the right wingers of both the Tories and Reform all complained that Rishi Sunak wasn't right wing enough. And
Yeah.
but
Well, he did fire Suella Braverman when she wrote a editorial that was published in the Times of London describing the Palestine Solidarity Movement as pro-Palestinian mobs that the Metropolitan Police should either arrest or ban from going on the streets. She actually wrote this without, the approval of Rishi Sunak, and she was terminated as a result of that. And then she didn't have a prominent position in the Conservative Party under Kimi Bandanak, who's
yeah,
you know, I think her ancestors came from Nigeria. She's head of the Tory Party, the Conservative Party right now. So
yeah,
she's joined Reform UK.
backed by the grassroots far right faction of the Conservative Party that is very
Yeah.
xenophobic. That is very transphobic, and yeah, thinks that Liz Truss was given a raw deal and should have been allowed to flourish and whatnots. And now, of course, a lot of them are backing Nigel Farage. Well, I hope they like taking orders from both Nigel and Richard, because it's
Exactly.
not too much democracy
Exactly.
in the Reform Party, as far as I know.
And then there's the Restore Britain,
Which
which
is even more.
is supposed to be further to the right than Reform UK.
I know. Don't you? Don't you love all these choices? All of these far right ice creams that one gets to choose.
Yeah, right.
But
So I understand that Diane Abbott has been readmitted to the Labour Party in the UK
I did
just
not know that.
yesterday by the new Prime Minister, Andy Burnham, the King of the North, who was the former Mayor of Greater Manchester. And they're betting on him to restore the UK as a world power and so forth. But I think their days are gone. Those days are gone forever.
The days
Yeah.
are numbered. I've actually met by the way, I've actually met Diane Abbott in person
Yeah.
when I covered the Labour
In the
Party.
UK or where? Where did you meet her?
In the UK,
Okay.
I was covering the Labour Party conference the last time Jeremy Corbyn was leader for
Yes.
yours truly, Black Agenda Report.
Yeah. Okay.
Uh, I'll I'll get my press conference badge later.
Credentials.
But
Okay.
and I was at the bar. If you were a member of the Labour Party and so forth, and you were part of like the whole like insider crowd, you all got to stay at the Hilton Hotel. Me and independent journalists had to stay elsewhere, and so I was at the So I was at the bar of the Hilton hotel, and I was getting my drink and trying to ask whatever questions I could ask people about. Do you think the party's going in the right direction? Do you really think like it's smart to be supporting Remain and reverse Brexit? And I'm waiting I'm waiting for the bartender to take my order. And Diane Abbott then approached me and she goes, and what do you do? What are you here for? And I said to her, oh, I'm a journalist. And she said, really? You're a journalist? Which publication do you work for? And I said, you may not have heard of it, but Black Agenda Report, news, commentary, and analysis from a Black left perspective. And then she said the following. She said, "Oh, Black Agenda Report! I'm a huge fan of Black Agenda Report, but I don't agree with all of your editorial stances on Barack
Right.
Obama."
Yeah. Oh, really? Wow. Interesting. Yeah, they were highly critical of Barack Obama,
Of course,
and they described him as being part of the so-called Black misleadership class.
exactly.
Right. And that was when Glenn Ford was the executive editor. Yeah,
Yeah,
who passed away several years ago. Yeah,
yeah,
5 years ago.
5 years ago, God rest his soul,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
both made both long live both him and Bruce Dixon's revolutionary
yeah.
spirits. But I thought that was hilarious. But I thought that was hilarious that number one, Diane Abbott was familiar with Black Agenda Report. But I also find it hilarious that people say that they're fans of Black Agenda Report, but then they say, but I don't agree with your stances on Obama and the Democratic Party. To which I go, have you actually read Black Agenda Reports, or like, because
Yeah.
you would know. That's
Well, I mean, she was considered part of the left wing of the Labor Party, but she was taken out based upon some comments she made, which were misconstrued as being anti-Semitic.
exactly.
So, yeah,
Well, it's yes, and she well, I think she's always I might be I might be a little harsh towards her, but I think she's always been very much a lawyer. No, a loyal member of the Labor Party. So no matter how ghastly right wing the party governs locally or even
globally.
or even federally, Diane Abbott will always be a very loyal Labor woman, even though she herself likes to position herself as very much a socialist, very much of the working
Mhm.
the working class of all colors and supportive of the left faction of the party. She spoke very highly of the greatest British leftist Britain has ever known, the greatest labor leader labor never had, and the greatest prime minister we never had, which is Tony Benn. And she was
Okay,
very
yeah,
and she was very supportive of Jeremy Corbyn's leadership. And funnily enough, the moment she supported Jeremy Corbyn's leadership, that was when uh, the British press was very hostile towards her. So if she made one mistake, if she made one hiccup, if she even sneezed wrong, the uh,
right.
the right wing British press and the BBC and Channel 4 would laser focus, just completely demolish her. And yes, and she did say, as a matter of fact, she did say that although anti-Semitism exists, I believe she said a version of it's not as big of a deal as, say, anti-black racism, Islamophobia, or even anti-Roma attitudes and institutional racism towards the Roma people. And for that, she was suspended from the party, wasn't even allowed to vote on any on any laws or anything like that. And I think well, I thought that Keir Starmer had forgiven her, but apparently, if you're saying that recently Andy
No, he
Burnham
didn't.
says that she's that full membership and her voting rights are restored, then that's quite then that is quite interesting. Yeah,
No, Keir Starmer, in response to what happened to Jeremy Corbyn, the poor performance of the elections that he ran for British Prime Minister, he wanted to move the Labour Party to the right, which is what he did. And
yeah,
but it still hasn't strengthened their position overall, and it hasn't improved the conditions of working people in Britain either.
yeah.
So I thought that was quite. But she still gets reelected to the Parliament as an
And
independent. You know,
she will often speak at she'll speak at official events organized by the Labour Party Women's Conference, but she'll also speak to the grassroots leftists. So when I was at the Labour Party conference, she did. Well, she herself didn't speak. She sent a spokesperson, one of her staff, to speak at a Stop the War Coalition event, and she'll go to events organized by the Socialist Workers Party. She'll accept invitations to speak to Navarra Media, which is very pro was very pro Corbyn. Some of their politics was very problematic in terms of de facto supporting imperialism and pro-Zionist positions. Although now they claim that they've moved further left than that. So she's quite the legendary veteran politician, as we say. I believe she should even be given she should even be called, I believe, the mother of the house, since she's been such a long time politician, member of parliament, and so forth. So that's
well, they should make her a baroness, I guess.
yes,
Huh?
yes, they should. Yes, they should. She should be called Baroness Abbott or Lady Abbott.
Yeah,
Uh,
Lady
maybe
Diana Abbott.
maybe Andy Burnham, depending how long he becomes, depending how long he stays as prime minister, maybe he can, make her a member of the House of Lords.
Yeah, and I've noticed recently too that they have been interviewing her on Sky News, about different political issues. And Sky News is independent; it's not controlled by the British government. Um, and it's quite interesting watching them as comparison to the BBC. They tend to be more critical, even of the national health services and the problems they're having in the NHS. So it's quite interesting that she's being interviewed by Sky News as well. But
That is,
we'll have to see what happens there. But this whole issue came up in our discussion today because of the Labour Party of Mauritius
yeah,
and the fact that in the 1930s, when it was formed, it did have close ties with the British Labour Party. But today, I would say they've moved further to the left. They're willing to set up coalitions with other political parties, even to the left of the Labour Party in Mauritius, to govern. And that's what has happened right now in terms of the current government that is ruling right now in Port Louis in Mauritius.
That is
So
interesting.
yeah, it really is. So I think Mauritius is a very, very interesting country to study because of its diverse history. The fact that as early as 1488, the Portuguese spotted the islands when they were attempting to circumnavigate the African continent. And then, of course, it appears on the map of the map that was set up in 1502, which we talked about earlier. And it's gone through various changes in terms of colonial interaction. The importation of Indian workers there, the enslavement, of Indian workers as well as African workers inside the country, and attempts by Portugal, later by the Netherlands, to colonize the territory. And then France, of course, attempted as well, but it collapsed largely due to the rivalry between France and Britain. The British declared that it was their territory during the 19th century. And of course, the rebellions that have taken place there throughout the 20th century, 19 in the 1930s, all the way through to the 1960s. So it's a very interesting country to study. The fact that it's a largely a archipelago and encompasses other archipelagos, for example, Chagos and others. So it's a very interesting country to look into, as a historical subject.
Exactly. And actually, uh, just before we, yeah, you know what? Just before we go, let's talk about. Just before we go, let's talk about this. So, what is going on with freedom of the press? The Trump administration is targeting Breakthrough News, Code Pink, Black Alliance for Peace. Uh, I believe they're also targeting Hassan Piker. I believe they're also targeting Democracy Now! Itself.
Wow.
And several organizations, the PSL, Party for Socialism and Liberation. I don't know if they're targeting the Answer Coalition, but apparently the Trump administration is asking all of these. Calla Walsh, a very well known Irish American independent journalist of vocal politics based in Lebanon, has done lots of work for Press TV, has quite her own popular Substack, is also being targeted. All of these outlets apparently have to come before a House committee. This is this is like Joe McCarthy all over again.
It is.
Uh,
It is.
and explain and explain themselves. Uh, Vaguely, Marco Rubio is accusing all of them of being far left terrorists that recycle propaganda from Cuba and the ideology of
Yes.
communism and stuff like that. I personally don't give a shit if that's true or not. but 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 this is very serious shit. I mean, Rania Kalik, I've not seen this. Who's been a guest on this show, co-host of Breakthrough News, which has now merged with People's Dispatch. Very brilliant journalist. There is Zoe Alexander or Alexandra, who now co-hosts of Breakthrough News. Say that they have to go before a House committee and so forth. And I've not seen this, but Rania Khalid was on Democracy Now! Itself. But Minpress News reported that
Yes.
even Democracy Now! Itself has to go before this whole thing. Minpress News, which has often been targeted by the dodgy folks of Silicon Valley, often they sabotage when Patreon when you can donate to Patreon. you can donate through PayPal to Mint Press News, but now apparently, I don't know if Mint Press News itself is targeted, but I know our dear friend, our dear comrade Manar Adley, who's also been on this program, the editor in chief of Mint Press News, this Zionist McCarthy website called Canary Mission, which has targeted Solomon Kamajan. It's targeted Leah Tarachansky. It's targeted everybody you can imagine who's unapologetically outspoken in their anti-Zionism and so forth. Well, now Manar is on their hit list of these are the anti-Semites you need to watch out for until they renounce their anti-Semitism, their Zionism and so forth. So have you heard about any of this? And if
Well,
and here's your response.
I do know that there was a white paper or whatever put out by the U.S. State Department saying that Cuba somehow is a terrorist state, and that it is encouraging various left-wing groups in this country to be disrupted. So they did respond on several occasions. The Cuban state media, Grandma International, as well, and one of the websites that I'm affiliated with, I'm on the editorial committee of Fighting Words, fighting-words.net, reprinted the statement by the Cuban Foreign Ministry in this regard. But if you can read Grandma International, they've been covering this now for a couple of weeks. But it's a very dangerous development. And as you said, it is quite similar to McCarthyism of the 1950s, where they go from one point to the next. Even people who are on mailing lists of left-wing publications were, subpoenaed to come and speak before Congress. You had the House Un-American Activities Committee, later the Senate Internal Security Committee, which investigated the Black Panther Party and other groups. So all of that is very dangerous. And they're trying to undermine Cuba in many ways, threatening the economy, of course. They've been doing that for the last 67 years. But they're also threatening military intervention in Cuba, as well as trying to denounce the country for being terrorists or supporting terrorist forces or potential terrorist forces inside the United States. So I wouldn't be surprised if they, start calling people before the U.S. Congress to be interrogated because of their alliances or their support for the Cuban Revolution.
Democratic Socialist of America is on this hit list, is on this pseudo House committee, and even politicians,
Yes,
even our left-leaning politicians from
like Rashida
Mamdani,
Tlaib.
Ilhan
Yeah,
Omar, Maxine Waters, who has gone more to the right in recent years.
yeah, but she's
So
highly critical of Trump, though. That's probably why.
they are they're not messing around, and I know a lot of us have our disagreements on imperialism. A lot of us are have our disagreements even on tactics, have our disagreements on even who we should be associating. And a lot of us have our criticisms of the historical record of such organizations like the DSA or Mamdani or even democracy now itself. Now, I actually do think it is now time to put a time out on all of those differences, and we actually should be now practicing unconditional solidarity to anybody who is being targeted by this far right administration and any capitalist administration that's going to come on afterwards. I mean, Barack Obama had his war on whistleblowers, and there was a hit list on so many outlets that were anti Clinton, anti Trump, anti both the duopoly systems, libertarian publications, and even far left publications like Black Agenda Restored, this stupid thing called Proper or Not. So I really do think that now is the time time out on our differences, time out on even the online squabbles that we get into, and unconditional solidarity to anybody who's being targeted by the Trump administration and any other administration that's going to come before that. Anything you want to say to that? And how are your colleagues at Press TV doing? Are a lot of them safe and sound? The ones that are based in both Iran and Lebanon and historic Palestine?
Yes, I mean, they're still broadcasting 24/7, and they're providing some of the best coverage of the current U.S. military aggression in West Asia. So, yes, I'm not surprised that they would be targeted as well. And those who have worked with them or contributed to their television station or even their articles that they publish on their website. Now, I wouldn't be surprised at all. And this just shows the crisis that U.S. imperialism finds itself, because Cuba is considered a beacon of hope to a lot of leftists and even non-leftists in the Western Hemisphere and around the world. So to say that you should not speak sympathetically about Cuba, you shouldn't be concerned about the U.S. military blockade and economic blockade against Cuba is absurd, in my opinion. And I think it's not going to work from the standpoint that the Trump administration and the MAGA interests in the Senate and the House really have nothing to offer the people of the United States or the people of the world.
Yeah.
I mean, people are getting poor inside the United States. There's less freedom today than there was in certain periods of the past. So it's not surprising that they would be doing this. Even DSA, because the fact that a lot of candidates in the Democratic Socialists of America who run as Democratic Party candidates are winning. And they're spending a lot of money trying to defeat these people. We saw what happened in New York just recently during the primary elections. And even here in Michigan, there are several Democratic Socialists that are running for various offices in the upcoming August 4th primary elections. And a number of them have good chances of winning. So you have pro-Israeli interests like AIPAC and others who are spending a lot of money. There's a Senate race here. There's a medical doctor, Abdul Al-Said, who is running for the Senate on the Democratic Party ticket. And they outspend him like 8 or 10 times. They're claiming he can't win against the Republicans. They're saying that he's anti-women, that he really doesn't support the Democratic Party and all this other nonsense, when in fact his major opponent is bought and sold, by the Israeli lobby. A woman by the name of Haley Stevens, who's in the U.S. Congress right now. And a lot of people are antagonistic towards her because she gets so much money from the energy companies as well as the American Israeli Political Action Committee. So it'll be very interesting to see what the outcome of the elections are going to be this coming Tuesday, to see if the progressive social democratic candidates win. There are a number of them that are running. So they're spending a lot of money telling lies about them, claiming that they're sexist, they're anti-Semitic, and so forth. And when that doesn't work, they just say, well, they won't be able to win against the Republican candidates in the state of Michigan, which remains to be seen. So it'll be very interesting to see how these developments pan out.
Interesting time to be alive. La lucha continua.
Yes,
and let's keep calm and carry on. And again, I've had my issues with major issues with democracy now, even major issues with the DSA and so forth. But when it comes to attacks like this, we
right.
Park our differences and and show up for one another.
Yeah, because if they bring them down or try to prosecute them for whatever reason, it's not going to be good for anybody else on the left in the United States.
Exactly. Couldn't have said that better myself.
Yeah.
Well, we were joined on this edition of One Plus One with Abayomi Azikie of Pan African Newswire and Black Agenda Report, longtime independent journalist, historian, Pan Africanist leftist, left wing activist, and more. Next week, we will look at our second to last country from the African continent and island nations, which is Diego Garcia. Join us for that, and don't forget to subscribe, donate, and check out the work of Pan African Newswire, Black Agenda Report, and the work of Black Alliance for Peace. And again, donate to One Plus One. Shares widely across social media and email. Facebook blocks me from sharing widely sometimes, so it's important that you, the audience, share. And again, folks, become a monthly sustainer so capitalism can't be fixed, and all of the horrific stuff that Abayomi was talking about with austerity and how the poor and the unemployed really don't have any social safety net. This is why I am continuously asking people to financially, if they can, be a Patreon to Chris Richards, the eclectic radical, or share his content widely so that folks can donate. Now, until then, folks, all of my best. Have a great weekend. Good night and good luck, Abayomi. I'll see you next week. And all my best until then.